Hello, everyone, and welcome to another edition of the Pure Investments Podcast. I'm your host, Khy. Right over there is Bowen. Got to figure out the angles on this. Um, so, this is, I think, now our first official episode with cameras, right? We've had a couple hiccups trying to
Too many hiccups. Too many
trying
hiccups.
trying to record with cameras. Unfortunately, we recorded a whole episode last week where, for some reason, audio didn't record. We tested everything out, so this one should get to you guys. Anyway, let's break into it. I have my Ethereum chart open right now, but let's start with Bitcoin, I guess, and we will kind of go from there. So Bitcoin right now, luckily, the episode that was lost last week didn't really mean anything because I believe during last week's recording we were at $6,700, so nothing
Perfect.
really happened since then. So at least we didn't really lose anything. So basically, Bitcoin, I'll just give you a rundown sort of on what we discussed last week. More or less right now, we're just kind of in this holding pattern. I know 2 weeks ago, I believe, is the episode we released where I went over the bull trap scenario, wherein these big breaks over the blue line end up being bull traps. A bull trap, of course, being where the market makers push a coin past a resistance mark. For example, this huge trend line we've got here. And by doing that, they make retail investors, which is you and me and Bowen and everyone else, who's not a billionaire, think that, we're breaking resistance. Now's the time to buy in. Everything's about to explode. And then they, obviously fake that out just a little bit. Not too crazy. You can see on each of these, it's like 1 or 2 days, right? Like 1 day, 2 day, 1 day, 2 day, 1 day, 2 day, and then drop it back down. So that's basically how a bull trap, in a sense, works. And that's kind of what we had here on these three. If you draw this straight line down, you can see those, and they're very obvious. And I mean, realistically, you could draw the other line, the old line that we were following, which I believe was something. Refresh my memory here, Bone, but I believe it was something kind of like this.
It was around there, yeah.
I got to turn off snapping so that it stops snapping me into future stuff. But it was basically like this. So even realistically, this whole thing is a bull trap. And if you want to think about it, if you draw this line, the original line we had, right? This one right here, we'll change the color on it so it's a little bit more obvious. So realistically, we bounced right off the breakout of the log downtrend. Now, I'm seeing this for the first time with you guys because I was just happening to draw it and happened to notice it. So this is another interesting way of looking at it, actually, that I hadn't really noticed before. So we broke out of the log downtrend here back in April, right? And now this whole downtrend here actually led us to bounce off perfectly where it was, where that breakout occurred. Basically, it's actually a better sign than I would have thought. I'm sorry for the kind of delay here. I'm just trying to process this because I didn't notice this until right now. But literally, we broke out of resistance, and now we just simply retested that resistance as support and held it and bounced off. So that's actually really interesting as a thought process because that's kind of what you normally want out of a resistance break, right? You want it to retest as support.
Yep.
Now, obviously it's a little bit more weird because of how steep that decline is on that trend line that we broke from. But you do have that, and you have, if we get rid of this line, what I was trying to show before, which is basically the bull trap scenario where this could end up being a bear trap. And what I mean by that would be if the price kind of took off from here and broke back into this triangle here, all right, and then from there broke out of the triangle, leaving this whole situation here to just be one giant bear trap, just to trap the final shorts that they can get in before the eventual run, right? And it would tend to coincide right with this triangle creation here. So kind of right where I have these lines drawn, right around the end of June, beginning of July would be where that would happen, if it's going to happen, right? You definitely have some signals that there's a good possibility of that happening. Let me get rid of the drawing tool here so I don't keep drawing everything. For one, we've got MACD threatening to cross here. I mean, literally it just needs a small little green day tomorrow and it'll cross over. Even a sideways, like, small red day would cross it. You've got wavelength down here that's clearly trending up. You can see it crossed right here, and we're clearly curling here off the bottom.
Yep.
Same thing with squeeze momentum. You can see today it printed that first dark red candle, which is the reversal signal to move back up. Same thing, dark green go down. And Stoke is kind of right where you want it. I don't know where regular RSI is, but if I had to guess, it's probably around 35-ish, 40. Okay, perfect. Right in the range you want.
Yep. In addition, if I can just mention,
yeah, go.
the KVO has been going up ever since we touched that bottom point and had that like few day reversal where we started having some upwards movement again. We've had the KVO go up and the CMF go up, but the accumulation distribution stay flat, which again is a good sign. Just to add to you.
Yeah, let's see KVO here.
I was just looking at the 4 hour.
Okay, yeah, I mean even on the daily though, I'll get rid of this dark blue KVO because it's kind of hard to see it.
Yeah, and I was just looking ever since, as you said, the bear trap. Ever since the bottom of the bear trap, we've had that cross up over 0. We've had the cross. I mean, obviously it's a histogram, so the cross doesn't matter as much. But we've just had upwards movement. CMF is going up as well, which makes sense given that the price is going up. But accumulation has stayed stagnant, meaning that it's trading upwards based off of the people who currently have it, without more people buying in to boost up the price.
Yeah, for sure.
That's again just more faith coming in.
Yeah, I mean the hourly is actually kind of interesting right here. Because you got this nice little flag. Let me delete these because these are kind of getting in the way. You've got this nice little flag on the hourly. However, you've also got a few indications that it could break down from here. Especially just looking at the 4 hour, we're kind of a little bit high on some of these indicators here. We'll have to see how that plays out. I mean, 4 hour charts can be weird. They can look like they're topped out for 3 days and keep moving upwards.
True, especially on Bitcoin.
Yeah, exactly.
But I could definitely see it returning back down to that sort of bottom trend line. Because you can kind of draw a trend line from bottom to bottom there, loosely. And I could definitely see it going back to that margin. Then again, like you said, it's Bitcoin. So 4 hour chart, I could see it continue to go up.
Yeah. I mean, outside of this little dip here that dropped us down to like that 6,000 range on that flash dip, it's basically been like 6,400 seems to have been the support for the past few days here. And right now we're just kind of trying to break back over this $6,800 range. Break over that though. If it were to break over 6,800 within the next day or two, I would assume we could possibly come up and retest this white line to try to break back into that triangle.
Yep.
We'll have to see how that plays out though. But who knows? Again, it's Bitcoin. Any little bit of good news or something that pops out could really send it. You've seen definitely some more increased volume here in the past couple days, just in terms of steady volume. You see how flat it was here before that drop. They're basically gearing it up. Even all these days were a lot more flat than it's been. So I'm curious to see how this plays out. Probably won't see too much movement before this posts, depending on how fast our video editor gets it out. But assuming this goes up sometime early tomorrow, I wouldn't anticipate too much movement before then.
Yeah. One thing I want to mention, because we've kind of talked about some bullish scenarios, is one bearish scenario, which I know no one likes hearing about, but I think they're real. To mention. Yeah, they're real, exactly. Even though they're kind of sad. But I was looking on the daily/weekly, and I just went on my log chart and kind of drew a straight line, zooming all the way out, kind of from the low point in July of 2015.
I know
all the way through, and then I just sort of struck through. I didn't follow bottom or top. I just kind of struck it right through the middle to find just an average kind of price movement line, just where is, in terms of log movement, our parabolic graph
going. Are you talking about this line basically?
Yeah, basically that line. I had it strike through, but it was very loosely drawn, so pretty much exactly that. And I kind of looked at, if we continued sideways movement, where would we end up? Or not sideways movement, but this general trend. So I kind of drew another line that was a general trend line of our bear period now. And I kind of made an intersecting point. And for me, it ended up being at around between 55K and 62K. Because, again, I drew two very loosely drawn lines.
Yeah, I was going to say like 5,000 would be kind of where I would see it. Like right around here if they wanted to intersect in like October.
Exactly. And that's kind of what I was watching with that line. And because I think it's important to look at that and important to mention that line specifically, because it does show the overall trend of a parabolic movement kind of returning to its baseline, to return to that upwards parabolic movement. I
Yeah.
think that's just important to look at.
Yeah, I mean, and you do have, you've got your 3 marks more or
Yep.
less. I think this one's a little off, but
Yeah, it is.
it's never going to be exact. As long as you're within a rounding error of moving off that line, you're close enough. So I could see it. If this were not a bear trap, I can definitely see that as a
Yep.
possible situation. And again, on the weekly, there is some room here for a little
Yep.
bit more downwards movement.
I definitely was watching the squeeze momentum as not my main, but a big indicator of that this could definitely be realistic. Because if you look at it, like you just had it displayed before you switched back,
This one.
right there, we had that slow green ramp up to the top to a slow decline, and now we're having the red decline, right? So we're having pretty much the exact inverse of what we just saw. And if that continued, you could see that continuing until we kind of hit that intersection point, theoretically. Of course, will this exactly happen? No, but I think it is a possibility. Returning to that original trend line.
Yeah, I mean, more or less though, you look at the weekly chart and it is very close to being bottomed out. I mean, squeeze momentum is actually turning up right now,
Yeah.
which is good. It's again like you said, the inverse of the green movement, which was the big parabolic move that kind of started back here last
Yep.
March. And now this is kind of the opposite of that. Same thing. Wavelength is almost completely bottomed out. Another week or two of sideways movement, and this thing will be at 0.
Yep.
And then if we flick over to here, you can see RSI is at 43 right now, but it was at like a low of around 40 probably last week. Yeah, last week it was at like a low of 40 here. So, there's a little bit more room to move with RSI. I wouldn't anticipate anything below 30 on RSI, but weekly RSI at 30, that's a ways off. But either way, I mean, right now we are at the lowest RSI we've been at since actually the very start of that purple trend line, if you look at that. So if I mute the volume here just because it's a little bit easier to see. So if you see here and here, we were at the exact same level. Just draw a line here just to make it a little more obvious. So RSI is there, and that's right where we started, right on this purple line here. So
Yep.
interesting to see that because RSI, people will often just use it as like a 30 to 70 metric, but it can work as support and resistance as well.
Absolutely.
There's definitely the situation where RSI acts as support. So this level, like at 40 here, seems to have been big resistance back here during the big bear period during 2014 to 2015. They couldn't break up 40. They kept trying and couldn't break over 40, and then it finally did, retested that 40 RSI support and didn't break below it until now where we're testing it again. So this could actually end up being extremely strong support here. You can see we kind of bounced off a similar level of maybe like 43, 44 a couple months ago back in March, which was that second run rather, back up to like 10K.
Yep.
So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out because while it's not bottomed down here at 30, which does leave a little bit of uncertainty open, as in, it could go down a little bit further, it is at a really crucial RSI support level.
Yeah.
And
it is curling
Stoke
upwards in addition to that.
It is. And that's because of the small, I mean, it's not a big green week. What do we got? Like a couple $100, $400.
But it's
roughly
coming, and I think it's something to look at is which I don't think you drew, but we did have talked about earlier, is the sort of descending wedge that Bitcoin has right now. Another possibility is instead of this actually being a bear trap like you discussed, this could just be the low bounce off of the descending wedge. That's a total possibility, and if that's the case, we bounce perfectly off of the line, and we could hit probably around 8K. To hit the top of the descending wedge. And that's a total possibility that would bring the RSI back up. Now, whether it bounces back down from there and the RSI goes back like we were talking about or continues upwards, that's left to be seen.
Yeah, and I mean, here's the kind of wedge we're talking about here. And that would actually, looking at that 4-hour chart that I had open before, this would actually line up pretty well for a break. And I mean, maybe what I said before is actually wrong. By the time this lists, you might actually see this break up to around 7K. Just looking at everything. It's tough to say because on the 4-hour, you see like Stoke RSI is really high up here. That doesn't really matter. Stoke can stay up here for days and days on a 4-hour chart. Regular RSI is only at 61, so that's
Yep.
perfectly within that realm.
Yep.
And you can see VIX is completely flatlined, which means there's likely to be some form of volatile move. You could see kind of back here. Now, that doesn't mean it's a green volatile move or a red volatile move. It just means that volatility is more than likely around the corner. You can see here where everything flatlined on VIX, and then boom, fell off a cliff. And if I go back more, you can see other instances where VIX bottomed out here, and then we exploded upwards. So that's kind of how you use that indicator. So definitely looking like there's a volatile move around the corner, which makes sense. I mean, we've been in this flag now for, almost like 2 full days.
Yep.
So,
and like you said, we could break up to 7K, or we could break into even the larger descending wedge, because you drew the smaller one that we have posted in our premium channel, but we also posted, the larger one from the 2 tops on the daily chart. It's possible that we get into that one as well. From that one top back in, when was it? March, and then and then more recently, those are 2 also tops that we could draw and make a descending wedge from. But again, it's kind of remains to be seen where it'll actually end up with this movement. Will it be a bear? Basically, the options are: will it be a bear flag? Will it be fake out? Will it continue in this wedge and break upwards? Will it continue to the other wedge and break upwards? Or will it kind of reach that 5K point that we're talking about, this long-term log trend? That's kind of those are the options here.
You're definitely in a weird spot in the sense of, like, on the daily chart here. This is like wanting to link up. On the daily chart here, you basically have what could be a bear flag here. You've got your pole right here. And then this whole section here, this last week could be a bear flag, right? But then you look at it on a 4-hour or an hourly chart, and you've got this clear bull flag here. So it's really it's being what I like to call painted, wherein they try to make it almost impossible to even tell what's likely to happen. They being the money makers, market makers, the people who've been trading Bitcoin for, almost a decade now, basically, who kind of control a large portion of the market. So it's kind of being painted that way right now. There's a lot of uncertainty with the way it looks. If I were making a judgment call off of the shorter time frames, the 4-hour, 1 hour, I would be really confused, because the 1 hour, no. So, like, because from the 1 hour standpoint, like, if we expand this 1 hour, it looks like MACD wants to try to cross up. It's kind of curled a little bit here a couple times and failed to, but it looks like this wants to cross up. Stoke bounced off 0. Regular RSI is at 60. VIX is flatlined, implying a move somewhere. So 1 hour screams up to me. 4 hour is actually very neutral, possibly down. And then the daily to me looks incredibly bullish. I mean, the daily to me, I don't see really like a bullish scenario looking at the daily, right? Like, you've got your MACD cross coming, you've got your squeeze momentum turning, you've got Stoke turning, you've got the RSI EMA cross here.
Yeah, totally bullish.
You've got
pretty much
everything
all bullish
lined
signs
up
on everything.
Yeah.
But it should be mentioned, it's also been all bullish signs for like weeks of bearishness.
Yes. Yeah.
That's also important to mention.
Yeah, I mean, well, we've had like periods like this little blip here where we kind of bumped from like 7,000 up to like 7,800 over the span of like 2 weeks, and then collapsed down, which is our most recent collapse. But anyway, let's kind of get away from Bitcoin. I think we've kind of discussed this ad nauseum now.
Oh yeah.
I think we're good on Bitcoin. One thing we're not going to do this week, I don't think, really, is talk too much about the alt market. Alts being things besides like Bitcoin, Ethereum, just because it's really hard to say where those are going right now. Because they're gonna rely so heavily on Bitcoin's movement. But I do want to go over Ethereum quickly. Do you want to start with your chart, Bowen, or mine?
Let's start with yours, because then we can move to a Bitcoin scale.
So if we look at Ether USD, which Bowen will tell you, I hate Ethereum USD charts.
Yes, he does.
There's a large reason for that. I may even have a video about it. I don't even know.
He did lecture me about it for a point at a while.
check our YouTube. I might have a video on why I don't agree with usually trading Bitcoin or Ethereum off of a USD chart. It's a lengthy excuse and reasoning, so I'm not going to get into it too much. Typically, I try to stick to the Bitcoin chart, and we're going to go over that in a second.
Yep.
But Ethereum USD. This is one giant triangle, and it lines up perfectly. You've got your three peaks here, 1, 2, and 3. You've got your three bottoms, 1, 2, and 3, and we bounced right off. Wavelength, perfect. MACD is crossing over right now on the daily. Squeeze momentum is curling. There's that first little, dark red line. I don't really care about Stoke on a daily chart exactly. Same thing. VIX fix is low, but it gave that buy signal right here, right around this same price at like 530. So if Ethereum can get out of this triangle right now, I'd say around like a break of 650. That could be huge. Now, this plays into, and this is part of the reason why I don't usually do this. This does play into Bitcoin a lot, right? Because Ethereum's dollar value is based on its Ethereum Bitcoin value, its SAT value of Ethereum.
Which, if you just hit compare and then just hit Bitcoin USD, that's a really easy way to look at it. Just remembering how close they are.
Yeah.
Are they exactly the same? No. But if you zoom in a little bit, you'll see that.
How do you line this up?
Scroll.
Oh, there you go.
You'll see it's almost perfect.
Yep.
And I use compare tools a lot to see what's different and what's the same. But obviously they don't line up exactly, but in time frames off. But the general trend is perfect. That bottom is perfect. The second bottom and top. And recently it's lined up exactly the same.
Yeah, you
which
can
is
see
why
here. Starting right here, it basically, and there's a reason for that. Primarily if we go to the Ethereum Bitcoin chart here, and I'll remove this compare so I get my rights back. If you notice that same period, Ethereum Bitcoin's just been flat.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what I was kind of saying, where the value of Ethereum USD is simply this value, the SAT value. So more or less we'll round to 0.08 Bitcoin times Bitcoin's value, which is $6,700, is how you get to the valuation of Bitcoin USD.
Right.
But either way, the Ethereum USD chart looks sweet as pie. And that is a good thing for Bitcoin as well as Ethereum, because it does allow you to kind of see a wider market scope in a sense when you see these perfect patterns lining up on other USD pairs because of their close relation to Bitcoin.
Yep.
So now let's look at your chart and run me through these lines.
So going through the Ethereum Bitcoin graph, I was just playing around with making lots and lots of wedges. And so if you look at the bottom, the big bottom line and the big top line, the two major lines I have going there, that was a wedge I kind of noticed that had two bottoms, a loose third, and two tops. So obviously it's not perfect. But I went, let's work off of this. And I kind of drew another angled upwards line starting at that second bottom peak at the end of 2017.
This one right here?
Yes, that one right there. And I drew that upwards line. I realized, maybe we could get three peaks, because I actually drew this graph a little while ago, because I only had two bottoms, and I thought this might be something. That's when I started to post in the premium channels and said this might be something. When we continued upwards, we then bounced downwards, and I decided, okay, let me draw a couple lines. And I have two lines there drawn just because this was a very loose graph. But those are essentially one's from the 4 hour and one's from the daily. The 4 hour candles are actually the top line. And those kind of went downwards. And if you go into a 4 hour chart, which I have open over here, they actually touch the tops perfectly. And so Ethereum is just getting wedged into this section. So then the last question is, will that upwards bottom support line hold the third touch? And it did. The third touch happened, and we got to the very end of the wedge, and we broke upwards out of it. So it's kind of this curving upwards general sort of general momentum, finally going upwards breaking out of that wedge.
So and more or less, I guess you had it drawn kind of like this, sort of, right? The one line?
Bingo, yeah.
So you can see.
And so it's not guaranteed that it's going to hold that. This could wick out, and we could go downwards. But right now, this is just an exciting thing that's happening for Ethereum at the current moment. And this would also coincide with just what you were saying about the Ethereum USD. For Ethereum USD to be self-fulfilling prophecy and fill out that wedge right there that you had drawn, it would have to go up in relation to Bitcoin. Correct. So this would be the perfect situation to make Ethereum go upwards and to break upwards out of that wedge, or just continue in the wedge at all.
And naturally, if Ethereum and Bitcoin run together, which frequently does happen, contrary to popular belief, there's this weird mentality that Bitcoin only runs on its own and nothing else runs with it, which is false.
Yep.
If they run together, you would see Ethereum USD really move. Because when Ethereum Bitcoin is doing these stupid things that you see here, where, back in November when I was in premium in December yelling at people to buy Ethereum and we ran all the way up here, these are the times where Ethereum does really stupid things, because if Bitcoin is stagnant, you're making huge gains still. And if Bitcoin is going up along with Ethereum, which sometimes would happen during these trends, it's exponential. So it's definitely something to keep an eye on. But to me, at least, Ethereum is looking very juicy right now. And I still think that the Ethereum USD chart lining up this well is a really good signal for Bitcoin.
Yep.
Because that only happens with Bitcoin, having the patterns that it's having right now.
Or, another possibility that I'm thinking about now, as we mentioned it so long ago and it still has not happened because we mentioned it as a long-term thing, but the flippening. We keep mentioning the flippening as a thing that could happen eventually. Well, eventually could be now. The Bitcoin graph is looking weirder and weirder, and Bitcoin is descending into this kind of darkness. Whereas if you look at Ethereum US dollar, you'll notice that it's fitting perfectly in that wedge and it's bouncing upwards and it's looking really good.
Yeah.
Could the flippening happen in this current Ethereum US dollar wedge, and all of a sudden US dollar is what you look at Ethereum with? Did I say that right?
Possible,
yeah. But it's possible. This could be the moment where people lose faith in Bitcoin and Ethereum rocks it.
Yeah, I decided to delete all my other lines on Bitcoin. This is the one I think matters here.
Yeah.
The more I'm thinking about it, the fact that we broke out of that long-term downtrend and actually just retested it here is actually bullish as hell to me. And I hadn't really seen it before recording this video, so I'm glad I was randomly drawing that line. See, sometimes you just got to draw random lines and things come to you.
It works.
So, this is, I can't stress enough that this is a really bullish signal. While things may seem bearish, very bearish, the daily indicators lining up with this type of bounce here is actually pretty nice. That bearish long-term scenario could still be in play. I mean, realistically, if you wanted, we could draw this straight down here.
Yeah.
And you could come down here to 4,000 and technically still break the long-term downtrend, which sucks and would suck. I don't think anybody wants to see Bitcoin at 4,000.
Unless Ethereum keeps rocking it and keeps going upwards, not controlled by Bitcoin, which is possible.
It is. Bear in mind, I mean, even if Bitcoin were to go to 4,000 and Ethereum were to flip in, right, that would mean even then Ethereum's only like 800, 900.
Yeah.
$800 basically, because point 0.2 is the flippening. 0.20 Bitcoin value for Ethereum is the flippening. So yeah, at 4,000 you're talking $800 on Ethereum's value. Far cry from the 1,200 it was back when Bitcoin was worth 17,000.
Yeah.
But you know what? At the end of the day, we'll kind of close it up here. But at the end of the day, it's a normal market cycle. These are things that happen. We had almost 2 straight years of green movement. It's really hard to argue with that. And if you happen to get in at 20,000, you just got in at the wrong time. At the end of the day, you're probably going to be fine. Not investment advice, but you're probably going to be fine. It's just going to take a little bit longer, But when you look back, ever since this point in August, not October, 8 is August. Since August of 2015, Bitcoin was at $165, and it never stopped until January of this year, basically.
Yep.
So you got to take that into consideration. That's over 2 years of more or less straight green rocket ship. Small little corrections where you'd have like a week or two of red, but overall, for the last 2 years, if you just bought Bitcoin at any point in those spans, you were green within a month, even if you bought at the height. So yeah, this pattern over the last 6-7 months here really does suck, but it's a natural market flow. It couldn't just keep going like that for the next 6 years,
Yep.
In another couple months, we'll probably be laughing at this. Maybe I shouldn't say couple. Another few months, We'll go with another few months, you know. But
just
like,
in case.
yeah, just in case. I don't want to say couple. People hold me to that being two. But another few months, you know, we'll probably look back and laugh at this. It's just a matter of when the market decides to turn.
Yep.
To me at least, not if. It's a when. You know,
Yep.
even if we get down to this 4,000, that would still imply a return to the mean and a bounce off of this in August and probably another breakup. So,
Yep.
you know, it sucks, and it's not the, you know, waterfall of cash that crypto had been for the past 2 years, but we'll get back to that point. Crypto's not going anywhere anytime soon.
It's just a matter of mentality. Are you thinking short term, or are you thinking, you know, long term? Are you thinking right now this sucks, or are you thinking Bitcoin was 4,000, if it became 4,000 again, no big deal, you know?
Yeah. You know, and if you go back and look at stock markets and stuff, they're all like this, you know. I mean, if you look at the Dow Jones after the housing market crash and then look at it now, even if you had bought, like, here, we'll use this as a good example, right? So I got to go to the weekly just to go back that far, though. So here's the housing market crash, right? So if you bought at the height of the housing market crash in 2007, and mind you, crypto moves a lot faster than the stock market, right? But if you bought at that height, it sucked, but eventually there was the return to the mean and then that insane breakout. And if you held through all that and you were okay, I mean, it ended up paying off in the end. You know, at this point, like we keep saying, it doesn't seem like Bitcoin has too much more downward momentum. You know, if you've been in since 20,000 and it goes to 4,000, is it worth it if it doesn't go to 4,000 and it goes to 18,000 again? If that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, like at this point, if you've ridden it out this far from being in up here, it to me at least, not, you know, and I'm someone who's in the trenches with you guys. Not that I bought in up there. I bought in, you know, more down here is where most of my money came in. But that's kind of beside the point. The point is, if you've ridden it out this far, the downward slope from here isn't all that much worse than it has been. You know, there's definitely greener pastures around the corner. And even this 4,000, I really don't see it happening per se. I would actually think it's far more likely that we would kind of break up and then have another bear period and come back down to like 6,000 where this line meets.
Yep.
To me, that makes more sense just looking at the indicators on the weekly and the daily chart. I don't see how we get to 4,000 right now. It just wouldn't really make any sense as far as indicators go. You would need a lot of sideways flagging here to bring these all up for several weeks. I mean, you'd basically have to stay around 7,000 for the next month or two and then a breakdown. So it's not really something I would be too concerned with. It's possible, definitely possible, but I'm not super concerned about it. But I think we'll leave you guys there, you know. I'm not panicking. I don't think you should be. And everything will be great in the end. No worries.
Woo! Heck yeah.
So for this week's edition of the podcast, I've been Khy. That's been Bowen. Wait, yep. I got to figure out how this pointing works. You're to my right somehow. So we will see you guys next time. Bye.